The lamp on my side of the bed stayed lit until almost 3 in the morning. He did not blow it out. He did not turn his back. He just lay there staring at the ceiling beams, and around midnight he said one sentence, quiet as a prayer, but it was not a prayer. He said, "A woman who closes her body closes the door on God." Then he rolled over, and the kerosene kept burning, and I kept counting the knots in the wood above me until they stopped looking like knots and started looking like faces. Whatever you are picturing right now, it is not what actually happened. This is not a story about a shouting man or a fist through a wall. It is quieter than that, and quieter is worse. Stay with me, because the part that broke me was not what he did that night. It was what happened over the next 411 days after I said the word no for the first time in my life. My name is Margaret, and I grew up in a strict old order Amish settlement in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I left when I was 31, with 6 children and a bag of clothes that did not belong to who I used to be. Now I tell the stories we were raised to swallow. If you grew up in a house where silence was called obedience, and where a woman's tiredness was called weakness of faith, tell me in the comments. Like this video if you have ever tried to say no to something and heard the whole room go still around you. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing the parts we were never allowed to write down. I read every message. Every single one. To understand what happened after the 6th child, you have to understand the world that raised me. Old order Amish life is not the postcard. The buggies are real, the plain dresses are real, the kerosene lamps are real, but underneath all of that is a set of rules called the ordnung. The ordnung is unwritten. That is the first thing outsiders miss. It is not a book you can read. It is a mood, a look, a silence at the supper table. It is decided by the bishop and the ministers, and it changes from district to district, but the weight of it is the same everywhere. It tells you how wide your apron may be, how high your buggy may sit, how loud your laugh may be in the yard, and how often your body belongs to you. Women in our district were taught 3 things before we could read. Be quiet. Be useful. Be fruitful. A girl who could not cook by 10 was pitted. A girl who could not hold a baby by 12 was watched. A girl who was not married by 22 was prayed over in a way that felt more like a warning than a blessing. Children were the proof of a good marriage. Children were the proof of a good woman. Children were the proof that you had not let the world get inside you. I married Amish when I was 19. He was 24, a hard-working man with soft hands for a farmer and a quiet way of setting his coffee cup down that I mistook for gentleness. Our first child came 10 months after the wedding. Our second, 16 months after that. By the time I was 26 I had 4. By 29 I had 5. By 30 I was pregnant with the 6th, and my body was not mine anymore in any language I knew. I do not want to tell you the graphic parts. I will not. But I will tell you that my back had stopped straightening in the mornings. My feet stayed swollen from Monday to Monday. I bled longer than I should have after the 5th, and the midwife pressed her hand on my shoulder and said, "The Lord will heal what the Lord wills." That was the closest thing to a warning I ever got from another woman, and I did not know how to hear it yet. The 6th was a hard birth. I will leave it at that. When the baby was 3 months old, Amish came to the bedroom one evening and set the lamp down on the dresser the way a man sets down a tool he intends to use. And I said the word. I said, "Not yet. Not another one. Not yet." My voice did not shake. That surprised me more than anything. He did not hit me. Amish husbands, at least the ones in our district, rarely do. What he did was quieter, and the quiet is the whole point of this story. He blew out the lamp on his side of the bed. He did not speak to me the next morning at breakfast. He did not speak to me at supper. He did not speak to me for 9 days. 9 days of passing the butter without looking up. 9 days of the children watching their father's face for weather. On the 10th day, my mother came by. She did not ask me what happened. She did not need to. In our world, news travels through the seams of aprons. She sat at my kitchen table and peeled potatoes for a long time, and finally she said, without looking at me, a woman who makes her husband cold makes the whole house cold. That was it. That was the whole sermon. Then she left the potatoes in the bowl and walked home. This is the language Amish women use to warn each other. We do not say, "He is punishing you." We do not say, "The bishop will hear about this." We say, "The house is cold." We say, "The bread did not rise this week." We say, "I saw your husband at the feed store and he looked tired." Every sentence is a door with something behind it, and every woman knows how to read the door without opening it. 2 weeks in, the visit started. First it was Amos's mother, bringing a jar of chow chow and a look. Then it was my aunt, who sat on my porch and told me a long story about a cousin in Ohio who had trouble in her marriage, and how the district had helped her find her way back to submission. She did not say the word submission. She said, her way back to peace. But I knew. By week 5, the deacon came. He did not come to me. He came to Amos, in the barn, and they talked for an hour while I stood at the kitchen window with a dish in my hand. When Amos walked back to the house, his shoulders were lower, and I understood something I had not understood before. He was not only punishing me. He was being punished too, by a system that measured his manhood in how many cradles he could fill. His silence was not just his. It was handed to him. That was the first crack. That was the day I started to see the shape of the cage instead of just the bars. The months that followed were a slow disappearing. I was not shunned. Shunning is the loud punishment, the one outsiders have heard of. What happened to me was smaller and older. I was simply moved to the edge of the room. At church, the women who used to sit close began sitting one bench away. At quilting, my stitches were redone when I stepped out for water. My name stopped being in the recipe swaps. My youngest was not invited to play with the other babies at the Sunday meal. Nothing was announced. Nothing needed to be. A woman who says no becomes a warning, and warnings are kept at arm's length so the sound does not spread. Amos and I lived in the same house for another year and a half like two horses in the same stall who no longer touch. He was not cruel. He was absent, and absence in a plain house is its own kind of weather. The children learned to be quieter around me. My oldest daughter, 10 years old, started setting the table without being asked, the way girls learn to fill silences their mothers are drowning in. The realization came on a Tuesday in February. I was standing at the sink with my hands in cold dishwater, and I looked down at my apron, and I thought, this apron is not clothing. It is a uniform. And a uniform means somebody else decides what I am for. That was the sentence that would not leave me. Somebody else decides what I am for. I did not leave that week. I did not leave that month. I stayed almost another year, because 6 children is not a bag you pack in a night. I saved money in a coffee tin behind the flour. I wrote a letter to an ex-Amish woman in Ohio whose name had been whispered to me by a cousin who did not know she was whispering. I learned that there were shelters that did not ask you to explain your dress. I learned the word autonomy from a woman on a payphone who did not laugh at me for not knowing it. The night I left, the lamp on my side of the bed was lit again. Amos was asleep. I looked at him for a long time, and I did not hate him. That is the part that people from the outside do not always understand. I did not hate him. He had been handed the same ordnung I had, and he had never been given a room in himself to question it. But I could not stay in a house where my no was heard as rebellion instead of a sentence. I took the children. I took the coffee tin. I did not take the apron. The therapist I saw in the first year out of the community was a woman with gray hair and a soft chair, and she said something in our 3rd session that I still think about. She said, "Margaret, your body was speaking a language your mouth was not allowed to learn." I cried for 40 minutes. She did not rush me. In the plain world, no one had ever waited for my crying to finish before telling me what it meant. I want to say something to the women watching this who grew up in houses where no was treated like a slammed door. Your no was never rebellion. Your no was information. Your no was your body telling the truth before your mouth was given permission. It does not matter if your house had kerosene lamps or fluorescent ones. If you were raised to believe that a good woman is a woman who does not close any door, you were raised inside a room without windows, and you are allowed to find the window. The lamp on my side of the bed does not burn anymore. I have electric light now, in a small apartment with mismatched chairs, and my oldest daughter is in a public high school, and my youngest still asks me sometimes why we do not go back. I tell her the truth, in the language she can hold. I tell her that a house is not holy just because it is quiet. I tell her that silence is not always prayer. Sometimes silence is just what a woman is left with when her no has been called sin for too long. Your no was a whole sentence. It always was. And the lamp on your side of the bed belongs to you.